In zoos, one of the most important things is the health and husbandry of the animals kept within it. The Zoo Licensing Act and Animal Welfare Act state that all animals kept under human care have to have all of their needs met. Twycross Zoo is no exception to this. To ensure that all of the animals in its care needs are met, they communicate with other zoos around the world and share all husbandry information on an online system called ZIMS. This allows other zoos around the world to share their knowledge with Twycross, especially regarding training, enrichment and dietary needs, so that the animals are receiving the best possible care that closely resembles their natural lifestyle. Twycross Zoo has an on-site vet so that any procedures can be carried out on-site without having to stress the animal out any more than necessary. A lot of the animals are also trained to do specific things like present themselves to the vet to carry out minor procedures. This helps a lot and doesn't impact on the welfare of the animal whatsoever, whereas if the animal wasn't trained it would have to be physically or chemically restrained to carry out minor procedures like health checks, heart scans and injections. The zoo tries to provide the animals with as much mental stimulation as possible. They do this by giving the animals different forms of enrichment to encourage behaviours that they would naturally display in the wild, and to try and prevent the animals displaying stereotypical or abnormal behaviours. They provide this enrichment in various forms, such as sound, for example by putting sound boxes within the enclosures, or by scent, by rubbing herbs or other animal species around the enclosure, taste, by scattering the food around the enclosure as seen here, and sight, by placing different objects within the enclosure that the animal is not used to. Here we have the bonobo scatter feed. Twycross Zoo carries out these scatter feeds to encourage the natural behaviours. In the wild, bonobos would naturally forage in groups for their food, searching under bushes, behind trees, etc. Twycross have tried to replicate this by scattering the food in hard-to-reach places. In the snow leopard enclosure, the zoo have tried to minimise the impact the general public have on the welfare of the animal. As one of the sides of the enclosure looks over the indoor canteen and shopping area, the zoo have created a form of mirrored window effect so that, although the public can see the animal within the enclosure, the animals are unable to see the public and are therefore not going to be submitted to any unnecessary stress. In the indoor gorilla enclosure, you're able to see that the zoo have tried to provide the animals with large climbing areas and ropes, and although it isn't very natural, the animals are still able to display their natural behaviours. This in turn can reduce stress inflicted upon the animal and aid social bonding. The outdoor enclosure is very similar to the indoor one with large climbing frames and ropes. This is where the animal's food is often scattered to encourage these natural behaviours. The gorillas are also kept within large social groups. This is also adhering to the Animal Welfare Act, which requires all of the animals' needs to be met, including social grouping. As you can see here, the penguins have been trained to walk around their enclosure. This encourages their natural behaviours, as in the wild, penguins would often walk and swim large distances in groups. This also helps the keepers with carrying out visual health checks so the animals don't have to be chemically or physically restrained. The penguin enclosure is also designed to help encourage natural behaviours. It provides the animals with a large water area where they can swim, dive and forage for sunken food. It also has many cave-like huts for the animals to take shelter in, something which they would often do in the wild.
The education potential for zoos is more than information and amazement at seeing and learning about wild animals. It is also to support conservation and enrich the experiences and heighten the awareness of visitors, creating an empathy and support for wildlife and the natural world. Before entering the zoo, you can take a look into the canteen where this board is presented and provides the visitors just a quick overview of what animals they have at the zoo and how many are found on different levels of the IUCN Red List. Accurate information about the species exhibited must be available. This is stated in the Secretary of State Standards for Modern Zoo Practices as a minimum requirement. Throughout the zoo, signs such as these can be seen. They provide the public with information about the animals as well as its natural habitat in the wild. These signs play an important role in the park, especially for the less well-known species, as it teaches the public how everyday things that they are doing could affect these animals. In a study done into the effects of education in zoos on the public, it was observed that educational effects are more likely when they are exposed to intense, focused experiences such as keeper talks. At intervals throughout the day, the zoo put on talks outside some of the enclosures whilst the animals are being fed. On our second visit, we observed a talk on the bonobos. These talks provide the audience with additional facts about the animals and the opportunity to ask questions to the talk guide.
Vertebrates like insects, and sometimes they also hunt small animals like little antelope. Now, bonobos are very sociable animals, so you'd always expect to find them living within a group.
Educational Institute trips. These provide groups of students ranging from primary to university an educational and exciting day out to the zoo so they can observe and learn about a variety of animals. Community groups. They also provide educational opportunities for community groups such as Girl Guides, Brownies and the Women's Institute. Outreach is a project that provides opportunities for people that cannot come to the zoo to still have the same experience in education through sessions that are run in schools and colleges. Throughout the holidays, they also run activity weeks for children and adults that allow them to come into the zoo to learn more about the animals and how the zoo is run. As well as providing education to the public, the staff that work at Twycross Zoo are also well educated themselves, with various qualifications such as degrees, PCGEs, masters and work experience, all which are important to help expand the learning of the public. Within the World Zoo and Aquarium Conservation Strategy, it is stated that even though education is generally important, special emphasis should be placed on conservation education. This is widely done throughout Twycross Zoo.
In the Zoo Licensing Act 1981, the directive requires that zoos undertake conservation measures. WASA introduces the idea of there being 4 general areas in which zoos can play an active role in conservation. 1. Education about conservation issues. 2. Maintenance of captive stocks of endangered species. 3. Research that benefits the practice of conservation. And 4. Support for in-situ conservation projects. At Twycross Zoo, conservation is a major priority. They breed a wide range of endangered species and are members of BIASA, EASA and GRASP. Throughout the zoo, they have 150 species enrolled in European species breeding programs. Mallison states that the primary conservation responsibility of zoos is the development of scientifically managed species breeding programs. It is important for demographically and genetically managed populations to be used as a method of preventing extinction. BIASA encourages their members to carry out and support field conservation work and also partner conservation charities and non-governmental organisations that specialise in field-based conservation activities. In 2013, it was stated that zoos should contribute to the efforts of governments and international conservation organisations for the preservation of critically endangered species within their natural habitat. The zoo contributes to conservation in the wild through their Conservation Welfare Fund, which aims to make a positive contribution to animal conservation and improve animal welfare worldwide. The fund contributed over £350,000 since it was created in 2006. It has supported over 55 conservation and welfare projects from 27 different countries around the world. Bonobos are one of the species of endangered apes that Twycross Zoo focus their efforts on. The Lola Ya Bonobo project is where currently 60 bonobos live. The zoo have helped with the running of the sanctuary since 2007. This includes participating in education programs with the local community by educating people on what a bonobo is, the impact of the bushmeat trade, and that it is illegal to hunt and capture bonobos. In 2010, the sanctuary organised the first ever successful reintroduction of bonobos back in the wild. By being involved in these projects, the zoo is already fulfilling some requirements mentioned in the Zoo Licensing Act 1981 and the Zoo Experts Committee Handbook. Twycross Zoo aim to operate as sustainably as they can, adopting novel green technologies wherever feasible. For example, composting and recycling waste. They have also developed a new extensive waterway system, where they use the reed beds to clean the water used on site. This creates their own nature reserve, thriving with native plant and animal species. Another useful tool in preserving biodiversity is captive breeding. It has the potential to maintain the populations of species under threat. In the past few years, Twycross Zoo have had some captive species successfully breed. The orangutans, gorillas, bonobos and Amur leopards are just some of these. In order to operate a successful captive breeding program, the history of each animal should be recorded. Personnel at Twycross are responsible for the chimpanzee studbook in the UK and the European studbook of red-fronted macaws. Also, hopefully in the next few years, Twycross Zoo would like to try and establish a reintroduction program of Amur leopards. This would be due to the partnership with Wildlife Vets International, experts in exotic animal veterinary care and currently working in the Russian Far East on the conservation of the critically endangered Amur leopards. If this succeeds, ex situ offspring could be released into the wild, meaning it would be the first big cat reintroduction program to build a wild population from captive bred individuals. Climate indicated the reintroduction is important for conservation efforts of endangered or threatened species. It means the zoo can help with increasing species populations in areas where there may have been a significant decline. After visiting the zoo, it was seen that many of the demands in the Zoo Licensing Act 1981 were met. They are part of the species management programs, undergo captive breeding and are focusing efforts on reintroduction. The zoo also has ways in raising money for all their programs with schemes such as Zookeeper for a Day, Adopting an Animal and Zoo Membership. It was also seen that promoting public education and awareness in relation to conservation of biodiversity is a main priority at Twycross, along with demonstrating encouragement for research participation through links with higher education. However, the zoo could focus some of their time and money on conserving the environment, therefore they would be indirectly helping species survival. Habitat destruction is a major role in species population decline, so consequently conserving the environment in the long term conserves the species.
Twycross Zoo is part of BIAZA, the British and Irish Association of Zoos and Aquariums, WASA, the World Association of Zoos and Aquariums, and EAZA, the European Association of Zoos and Aquariums. Each of these associations set out specific standards in regards to animal welfare, health and safety, and the general management of the zoo. These standards are considerably higher than that required by law. As well as abiding by EAZA's, BIAZA's and WASA's guidelines, Twycross are legally required to abide by several laws including the Zoo Licensing Act of 1981 and the Dangerous Wild Animals Act of 1976. Establishment can only become a zoo by acquiring a zoo license. The local authority are the ones who enforce this law. Periodically, the zoo will be inspected, and if deemed unsafe, the zoo may be closed down. Every 4 years, the license must be renewed. The Zoo Licensing Act sets out specific requirements regarding health and safety, enclosure and animal welfare. It is a legal requirement that employers have a health and safety policy in place. Twycross Zoo have 5 or more members of staff, which means they are required to have a written statement that states safe operating procedures and plan of action in regards to emergencies such as fires or the escape of an animal. The Managing Health and Safety in Zoos document by the Health and Safety Executive contains practical advice for zoos in regards to health and safety and how to implement procedures. The Dangerous Wild Animals Act of 1976 lists animals that are deemed dangerous and are not allowed to be kept unless the establishment has a Dangerous Wild Animals license. The Secretary of State's Standards of Modern Zoo Practice also have a list of dangerous animals, however they are split into categories. Depending on the category, guidelines are stated in regards to enclosure design and management. If an animal escapes, the protocol taken depends on the category of the animal. If a Category 3 animal such as a meerkat or mara escapes, the protocol will differ to the protocol taken if a snow leopard escapes, which is Category 1 animal. In the case of a Category 1 or 2 animal escaping, the firearms team may be required. The firearms team consists of experienced and well-trained staff that have an up-to-date firearms license. Guns and ammunition, by law, Firearms Act of 1997, must be stored separately and must be kept in a storage facility that requires 2 or more lockable doors to be entered before being able to access the gun. Every activity that is undertaken in the zoo by either members of staff or a member of public have been evaluated and a risk assessment has been filled out. Activities include walking or driving around the zoo, mucking out, school trips or summer camps. This is required under the Health and Safety at Work Act 1994 or Riddle Act 1995. Signage is placed all around the zoo to warn the general public about the dangers they may come into contact with. On most enclosures there are signs saying that the animal may bite, and in case of an enclosure using electric fencing there are signs warning them of electrocution. Most of the enclosures at Twycross Zoo have a double barrier system. The first barrier is the enclosure itself, and the second barrier is a small waist-high fence that is about a metre away from the enclosure. In regards to entering an enclosure, which is mainly done by staff unless it is a walk-through exhibit, a double door system is usually in place. This is when one door is entered and shut before entering the second door. This is put into place as a secondary measure to prevent animals escaping. Every member of staff is given the opportunity to undergo certain training such as first aid. Every day at least 2 members of staff that are first aid trained are on duty and are generally stationed on either side of the zoo to allow for rapid response if an accident should occur. If an accident does occur, the incident must be recorded in the accident report book, which is reviewed periodically to see if any measures can be put into place to reduce the risk of the accident happening again or on such a regular basis. Every morning and night the perimeter of the zoo is checked by a member of staff to see if there are any holes or breakages in the fencing or barriers. Staff members of each section of the zoo also do a perimeter check of every enclosure and do a stock count of the animals every morning and night to ensure the enclosure is still structurally safe and that no individuals have escaped. As an additional health and safety measure, 1 to 2 members of staff live on site to ensure the zoo is not left unattended. Should an animal escape during the night or early hours of the morning, a staff member is there to deal with it.